Good afternoon. My name is Ashish. I work in India in school education, and we're trying to improve the quality of primary and middle school education at scale. I'm really going to speak about three things this afternoon. I'd like to speak a little bit about the inspiration which drove this project. It's taken 9 years so far, and they felt more like 90 or 900. And I think if you really want to know an entrepreneur, whether it's Zafar or Patrick, we heard some moving stories today, you need to know what the inspiration is. So I'll try and share my share and inflict some of my story on you. The second part I'd like to speak about is the work, which is actually the most interesting part. And I think we have a better mousetrap, and I would like to spend a little bit of time taking you through the detail of what we do. There will be a few slides, but there's really one slide you need to look at carefully, and I'd leave it to you to figure out which one that is. And then finally, I guess it's reasonable to speak about, so what have we learned and where does all this go in the future? I certainly think it has applications for other parts of the world and so on and so forth. I grew up in a middle-class home in Delhi, and in the late 80s and early 90s, it was still fashionable to want to do something for people who were less privileged than yourself. And I tried working with nonprofits in my college years, and I wanted to do something that would change the world and make it better. But I did not find any role models. I did not see anything really quality or scalable. And I saw a lot of megalomania around me. And as a young person, I was quite disillusioned. And also, life took over and you needed to go get a job. So that's what I did. I did a master's, and like Alex, I started in Procter & Gamble, actually. For about 9 years, I was in the corporate world, and one thing led to the other, and I ended up in Paris, of all places, and had a very comfortable life working for a large French company. But this bug never left me. The real trigger was actually the birth of my 2 children. I got married young, and they came along, and I got fascinated by the differences in the 2 children. And I have every reason to believe that they're both mine. And this superimposed by this social bug I had, this operating system started kind of revving up again and saying, you need to do something with kids and go back to India. So against all advice, I quit my job in Paris and secretly applied to the education school at Harvard and got accepted. My family went back to India, and I came here to do a master's program. My focus was mind, brain, and education. And as I've shared with others, that was one of the best investments I could have made. And I was like a hungry little puppy. I took double the number of courses I needed to, went to MIT, went to Kennedy School, found my future partner, who was a student of Iqbal. And thank you, Iqbal, for all your encouragement. And finally went back to India in the fall of 2002 with a single vision, which was, how do we improve schooling for all of India's 250 million children? And if you look at young children, the interesting thing about young children is that till they're about 4 or 5, irrespective of where they come from, they're actually pretty much the same. This is, these are 2 lines which describe the story pretty much of lost potential. This is data from 2 kinds of schools: high-income schools, which are green-colored, and low-income schools, which are red-colored. And on the left, where it says 1, is scores in grade 1 or just before grade 1. And on the right, where it says V, that's actually 5, it's at the end of 5 years. It's interesting to note that when they start off, they're pretty much at the same level. After 5 years, the gap between the children who are in high-income schools and low-income schools actually grows up. And what is really sad is, as you can see, both the lines are declining. So children are perhaps worse off in grade 5 than they are in grade 1. But the point remains that without getting into the semantics of how education is different or complex in different parts of the world, primary and elementary education is a huge challenge. And a visual which kind of encapsulated us at that time was, how do we move schools from the reality of the left to the potential of the right? And what was that? How do you move schools from rote, repetition, fear, really no learning, to a place where they were exploring, investigating, they were self-learning, confidence was happening, and really children were figuring out for themselves, not only for the rich children, but also for the poor children. Now, the going-in hypothesis was that teacher training or professional development will do it. So for the first 3 years, armed with our Harvard degrees or whatever, we went around from school to school with 3-day, 4-day, 5-day teacher training programs, promising that, look, you do this program, and after that, suddenly the quality of teaching will improve. And it was a logical hypothesis in a sense that most of the teachers, like in any part of the world, are not necessarily there by choice. They themselves did not have a great education. So we would give this special injection, and it would improve. Well, guess what happened? After we did this, we started going around to school heads and asking them that, look, you remember we came and did that training program, what happened? After the politeness was over, they would say, you know what, most people have just gone back to what they were doing previously. And so by around 2006, 4 years back into India, I had used up all my savings of what I had saved up when I was in Europe. I was pretty much bankrupt, and the idea I thought would work was not working. And there was every reason to want to give up. And in almost desperation, I did two things. I started traveling around schools in India and seeing what's happening there. And second, I started teaching grade 4 science myself. And that's when I realized that this job of teaching is really, really hard. It's hard enough in any classroom, but 45 kids in 45 degrees centigrade, one kid running out of the class, the other one won't shut up, third one won't open her mouth, the fourth one's been sick for a week, and Howard Gardner was not coming to save you, It was... And one of the schools I visited, normally you go there, people are very deferential, and the class stops, the teacher smiles at you, and you say a few kind of platitudinal things and walk out. But this 22-year-old girl gave the chalk to me and said, "Sir, can you teach this class better than me?" That was not supposed to happen. All my blood drained. I was embarrassed. I was like, oh, I'm in a hurry. I need to leave. That's when the penny dropped. That, buddy, if you don't have a better mousetrap, if you can't tell her in the class how to teach that lesson better, you're actually wasting everybody's time. And that's where part 2 of the story starts. That's when we realized we need to go to the drawing board and create every lesson from scratch. So I told the team, all this training nonsense stops from tomorrow. We're going to take every lesson in the Indian standards, K through 8, in English, in math, in science, and social science, concept by concept, 45-minute lessons. What do you do in the first minute? What do you do in the third minute? You're talking group work? What group work? You're saying demonstration? What demonstration? You're saying resources? Which one? How much do they cost? In extreme amount of detail. And only then it is useful. Then let's talk about training. It's pretty much like, you have a flat on the highway, there are only two kinds of people, right? Those who can help you change that, and everyone else. And we wanted to be in the first category. And that's when this system got invented. It's so simple in hindsight. We said every class will have 5 things. It'll have clarity of objective. May no class start without the teacher and the student knowing what is this lesson about. Is it about fractions? Then what about fractions? Is it about properties of air? Then what about properties of air? Air occupies space? Okay, then let me know that. And let both the child and the teacher know that. Step 2, as all of cognitive psychology, brain science, education research in the last 100 years shows wherever possible, introduce the concept with activity, children learn better. But then you need to tell her which activity, exactly which one, and how long will it run. Step 3, then we reflect on the activity, analyze it, and when you reflect, may the children speak first and you speak second. A massive shift culturally, where 95% of the talking in pretty much every classroom is children. Step 4, we are not some namby-pamby, progressive, softy, go easy on children system. We believe in rigor, we believe in practice, but the application comes as step 4, not step 1. You can do math sums, you can repeat things, you can make mistakes. You're not going to learn to bike till you do it over and over again, but only after you've experimented and reflected. And step 5, proof of the pudding is in the eating. We are going to regularly assess children and see if they're doing better. So that was the program which we invented. We created a bank of 8,000 lesson plans, K through 8, put a 30-hour teacher training program alongside that, and beta tested it for 1 year in 3 schools. And the results blew us. And remember, I had sold soap in my childhood, so we did a side-by-side. We took one classroom where there was regular stuff and one classroom where it was this method. And we did a pre-test and a post-test. And both classes improved, but the improvement in this classroom was twice as much. And what was even more encouraging is that the bottom half of the children on the pre-test improved by twice as much in the post-test when taught this way. So finally we said, after 5 years of head-banging, just maybe the sun is rising. And we moved from 3 to 30 to 300. We are now in 700 schools across India. We serve 250,000 children. And in a way, those numbers are encouraging. The start has been made. But India has 250 million kids. So that's 1,000th of the journey. But as someone said, a journey of 1,000 steps starts with one single one. So I think that has begun. And it's really encouraging because if this can stay on, and you do some simple math, something I learned in my John Sterman class at MIT, the power of doubling. 250,000 doubled for 10 years is almost 250 million. We've been doubling for the last 3 years, so if we can keep that momentum, perhaps we'll get somewhere. I just want to quickly close with a couple of the learnings and challenges which we are facing, and that's the third part which I promised. I think what's happening in world over, and it's painful to anyone who cares about children, there's no shortage of money. So much money is going into the education sector in K-12, but I think a lot of it is misinformed. There was a massive McKinsey study last year, I don't know if some of you read it, on K-12 reform around the world. And what they said is what our experience is validating. Do not spend on resources, on structure, till you know what your process is. So I see government schools in India which don't have toilets for girls, but they have computer labs, but they have plastic covers on top, or they don't have electricity, or they don't have internet connections. The process I described to you can be run under a tree and produce some pretty sophisticated results. So I think process is the way to go. It doesn't cost that much money, and it can be done everywhere, in India, in Africa, and I think, maybe this is somewhat arrogant to say, I think the developed world can also learn a few things. They have their share of problems. And at the heart of all of this is, can we move the discourse from good teacher, bad teacher, good personality, bad personality, to good teaching? Once you make it a verb, and you've defined the verb in a very high degree of detail, then perhaps even the so-called ordinary people can do an extraordinary job. Thank you so much for listening to me. I'll be happy to take questions.